See, you know what? Because I heard the click stop and I thought you stopped.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Lucas and you're watching Fine Tuning. As usual, I'm a little behind on this, but today we're checking out the PRS MT100. MT, of course, for Mark Tremonti, and 100 for 100 watts. So a few years ago, Paul Reed Smith and Mark Tremonti released the MT15, which is a 15-watt lunchbox head, although it was the loudest 15-watt lunchbox head I've ever heard in my life. I have one, it's a great amp. This, however, is the 100-watt Big Daddy version. The MT100 has three completely independent channels. You have a clean, overdrive, and lead channel. They all have their own individual presence, master, bass, middle, treble, and either gain or volume controls. And it comes with this very nice sturdy PRS foot switch to switch between your channels, lead, overdrive, and clean. And one thing I want to say I really like about this foot switch is that this foot switch has a detachable cable. So this is a 7-pin cable, like a DIN type cable. But if your cable is to go bad, this detaches from the foot switch. It's not hardwired into it, so you could just get a new cable, which is really forward thinking. Before we get into the tones, let's talk quickly about how I'm recording this. I'll throw a picture up on screen, but in my isolation booth, I have my Blue Guitar Twin Cab, which is a tight 2x12 cabinet, which I have put Celestion Vintage 30s in. And I have each speaker mic'd individually, one with a Shure SM57 as a bright mic, and the other with a Lewitt DTP340 as the dark mic. Today I'm playing my PRS DGT guitar, which is my favorite guitar. It has my signature Planet Tones Statera humbuckers in it, which are kind of medium output pickups, and they're very clear sounding. I'll leave a link to those in the description if you want to check them out. Let's hear some tones out of the clean channel, starting with the bridge pickup. I'm going to put it on the neck pickup and turn on a little bit of delay in the effects loop, and then you can hear a little bit of this sort of fingerpick Tremonti style playing. And now I'll split the pickups for some single coil tones. Moving over to our overdrive channel, this is kind of a unique, interesting channel that I wouldn't really expect from this kind of amp. The MT15's clean and lead channels are not terribly dissimilar to this, other than the bigger power section. But this overdrive channel is kind of its own unique thing. It has a really smooth, kind of American drive character that reminds me of like a Dumble or an old Boogie or something like that. It's really smooth and vocal, has a great fat mid-range and a nice, like, sort of warm, round bottom. It's a lot of fun to play, and it's very dynamically responsive. And I just love the way that it sounds with humbuckers. It's this really sweet kind of Robben Ford type sound. And you can get a lot more gain out of it, but I'm going to kind of start with it about halfway up, because for me, that's where it starts to sort of do the thing. And the more gain that you add, the kind of more smooth and fusion-y you get. So starting with the gain about halfway up on the bridge pickup, that sounds like this. I wasn't expecting to find that kind of sweet mid-gain vocal blues thing in an amp that Mark designed, because I don't think of Mark as that kind of player. But man, it sounds great, and it's so versatile and usable. I mean, you could get a lot of different sounds out of just that channel. I'm going to put on some delay and kind of turn up the gain on that channel a little bit just to kind of hear how singing and vocal it'll get, and then we'll move over to the lead channel. Moving on from the overdrive channel, let's talk about the lead channel. So in terms of gain, the lead channel sort of picks up where the overdrive channel lets off, but the voicing is quite a bit different. And there's also just an insane amount of gain on tap. I have this channel set at about 9 o'clock on the gain, and that's still very distorted, very aggressive sounding. So let me just play you a little bit with that, starting with our bridge pickup, and then we'll kind of play with the gain and some different pickup settings. Often I find with amplifiers, when you get a high gain rhythm sound that sounds great, and it's really like clear and punchy and bright and strident on the low strings, and you get those like nice crunchy chord sounds and pinch harmonics, that sound does not usually translate to lead sounds. So if you try to play a solo with that tone, it'll end up sounding like kind of shrill or ice picky. But the MT100 and the MT15 for that matter, they don't do that. So as you work your way up into the high registers with that tone that you just heard, it's going to start to smooth out and be kind of vocal and tight sounding, which is really cool. So I'm just going to use that same tone, but I'm going to turn on a little bit of delay and play some lead licks. so let's talk about my final thoughts about the amp. If I was going to give the amp a rating, I think I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. I'll explain the 0.5 away from 10 in a second. So things that I love about the amp. The clean channel. It's high headroom and clear and articulate and bright and chimey and all the buzzwords that you want it to be. And that's without any kind of compression or reverb or anything. That's just the clean channel of the amp. The overdrive channel. Wow. Just like blew my mind. I just wasn't expecting that sound to come out of this amp. I have other amps that do sounds that are kind of like that I really love, but that's all they do. And I wouldn't expect this amp to be able to do that. So the fact that it can is really like a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. The lead channel, absolutely barbaric. Even at 9 o'clock on the gain with kind of medium output humbuckers, it is just searing, and there's so much sustain, and it's vocal, and the bottom, it just hurls the bottom across the room. I wish you could be in the room with it to feel it. I mean, I have the cabinet in my booth over here, and it's just shaking the whole studio building. It's just got so much power underneath it. And that, whatever it is, the transformer combination, the power tubes and everything, like it just has so much headroom for that bottom that it feels tight and responsive even though it's huge, which is super cool. I also really dig that you can use the same tone for that high gain rhythm stuff to play lead and it still translates, because as I said, that's kind of an uncommon thing with high gain amps. You usually got to have one or the other. I dare say it's almost a little bit brown sometimes. It has a little bit of that brown sound thing going on where it kind of like compresses in a really nice way and there's like note articulation. Really, really nice. The effects loop sounds like nothing, which is what I want it to do. I want it to sound like nothing. And what I mean by that is it's essentially transparent. When I unplug the Echoplex pedal and play the amp and then plug it back in with the effects loop, the amp sounds the same to me. Whether the delay is on or off, it sounds the same. Which is what I want out of an effects loop. That's terrific. The noise floor on the amp is very, very low. On the clean and overdrive channels, even at a pretty loud volume, the kind of idle amp noise is almost nothing. It's almost silent. And then on the high gain lead channel, there's a little bit of noise, but for the amount of gain, the noise that it's putting out is very minimal. Like, I would have no qualms about taking this out on a very loud stage and not using a noise gate. I think you're all good. Unless you just want that genty, like gated front end thing. I don't think you need a noise gate for this amp. It's very well built. The foot switch. I quite like the foot switch. Look at this LED. So LEDs are very bright. This is super nice for when you are on a brightly lit stage, like outside or something, to be able to see what channel you're on. I also really like that this cable is detachable, so that if the cable goes bad, you don't have to work on the foot switch. My custom 50 has the cable hardwired into the switch, so if that ever dies on me, I'll have to like do a physical repair. Now, to get real nitpicky, here's the 0.5 thing I mentioned earlier that keeps it from being a 10 for me. This is really specific to my situation, I realize. So I am a singer as well as a guitar player, and so when I'm playing live, I like to step on one button and have multiple things happen. And so to do that, I have for years religiously used things like the GCX and ground control unit from Voodoo Labs, or the Boss MS3, the Boss ES5 loop switchers and controllers. So what those allow me to do is hit one button and have a bunch of effects and maybe like amp channels change at the same time. This is kind of incompatible with those because the way that the channels are controlled via foot switch is through a 7-pin DIN cable. And that's fine. Those are readily available cables. You can have backups or whatever. But those don't interface with relay switches that use TRS cables. So what I wish this had, in addition to the foot switch jack, was just individual 1/4-inch jacks to switch the channels with the looper. I wish that it had that on it. Lots of amps that just have like 2 channels will just use a TRS cable. Boogies and a lot of amps like that will have like all of these things in the back so you can use them with rack switchers. I just wish that this had that, because then I would be able to use it with my loop type system, and then I could control the entire rig kind of with one button push. That's the only sort of 0.5 thing. So if I was going to use this amp in a live situation, I'd have to do some tomfoolery to get some things to work. I might have to use some additional piece of gear or something like that, or just not even use a loop system. So, all right, and that is my demo of the PRS MT100 head. I think it's terrific. I think you should check one out. Again, thanks to Brian for loaning it to me so that I can use it for this demo, and I'm looking forward to recording it for some InterTwyneD stuff because it is just diabolical sounding. I want to thank you guys for sticking around and watching. Leave me a comment and let me know what you thought, and until next time, I will catch you later.